Should be on, I think.
Yeah, I think it is. Okay, great. Well, welcome. I'm so glad to see people here. We may have a few more people coming in, but I'm Sally Gabb, and I am one of the founders and a member of the One Book Committee. And we are very excited to have Robert Rak here provide us this presentation on whales. Of course, many of you have read our one book this year, which is In the Heart of the Sea, which is a fabulous book if you haven't read it. It is just the most amazing story of survival and sort of a confrontation between two major species on this planet. Robert Rak actually graduated from Holy Cross in undergraduate school and got his master's from UMass Dartmouth. He actually was a whale watching naturalist early in his career, and I'll let him tell you a little bit more about what that means. He is on this campus one of the leaders in our sustainability initiative, and he is the tech coordinator for environmental technology. He has presented at many conferences and has included in his research on marine life and sustainability issues in the ocean. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce Robert Rak to talk to us about whales.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for coming. I always enjoy talking about whales. My relationship with whales has gone way back from when I was a very small boy and my parents brought me to the Whaling Museum in New Bedford. And from then I was hooked on whales, and I actually began when I was 15. I took a little mini course in school that they had. It was on scrimshaw. And shortly after that, I became a scrimshander. I had my own company when I was 15, had my own little business cards and everything. And does anybody know what a scrimshander, what it means? It has an actual, it means someone who wastes time. That's what a scrimshander is. And so, except for me, it wasn't wasting time, because I was working another job when I was 15. I had Emergency Employment Act in Fall River for youth and everything, so I was working 30 hours a week in the police department as kind of like a maintenance, doing work down there, washing police cars, cleaning the floors. I used to tell people when people would come back from school that, hey, what'd you do over the summer? I was in and out of the jail cells every week, because that was my job. I had to clean the jail cells and clean the toilets and everything in the jail cells. And so, but I was making $1.80 an hour doing that at that time. That was 41 years ago. And so making scrimshaw, I was making all kind of jewelry. Anything you could think of, I made. Rings, tie bars, necklaces, earrings, cufflinks, everything. And I could make, in 3 hours, I could make $20 making one of these things. So it was quite lucrative for me. I saved up a lot of money. I was able to buy my first car and when I was 16, and I got many things for the house and things like that. So it was a very good thing that, so scrimshaw has been good to me, but but I did stop it shortly after that. As I became more into environmental things, I was looking at where the ivory was coming from, and I was concerned that the ivory that I was using might not be coming from fossilized sources of ivory, so I quit. Even though it was a good business, it was against my own personal beliefs. So I turned down a lot of money, because my scrimshaw was actually across the country and stuff. I had people, I would do anything, planes. I had pilots making tie tacks for it, and belt buckles. And so, but anyway, this was one of my last pieces of scrimshaw that I did. It's an artificial whale's tooth, but this would be about the size of a sperm whale's tooth. And this is the Charles W. Morgan, which is the oldest commercial vessel in the United States right now. The old Ironsides is an older wooden vessel, but it was a naval vessel. This was a commercial vessel. And it's actually going to be making a tour of New England. So one of the things that was very important for me was I always dreamed of climbing the rigging of a tall ship and stuff. And so I got that chance. When the HMS Bounty was owned by the city of Fall River, I worked as a volunteer on the fundraising committee. And so I took my son's Boy Scout troop, and we spent, in turn for turning work for them, cleaning things and stuff, we got to spend a weekend on the Bounty. So I got to climb up the rigging and everything, and you know, I was in heaven. You know, it was something I had always wanted to do. And so, as I say, I've always been interested in whales for a long time. So, you know, this is like paradise, me here talking about whales, because I did it in 1983. I was a whale watch naturalist, and I would go to schools and when we weren't on the boat. And so I gave 225 hour-long lectures that year in schools throughout Massachusetts, Rhode Island. Sometime I was doing 6 of them a day because I got paid by how many I did. So it was important to hustle. So, but when we look back at the whaling industry, whales have always been a part of our history. You know, if we look back at some of the first recordings of whaling in the United States, in 1605, an English sailor coming across actually recorded the Native Americans whaling off of Maine. So, you know, the Native Americans have been whaling for hundreds and hundreds of years prior to us coming. And so even when we look at, you know, the Mayflower, when the Mayflower came over, they have recordings that right whales were riding in the bow wave of the Mayflower. And there was talk that there were so many right whales in Cape Cod Bay that you could basically walk across them to come across the bay at one time. And so this has been the idea of when the golden age of whaling, actually what we talk about the golden age of whaling, whaling actually began in Nantucket, actually when the Coffins and the Macy's and the Hussies, when they bought Nantucket, then shortly in 1659, shortly after that, in 1670, was when whaling began on Nantucket, on a commercial venture. And by 1700, they had about 60 people on Nantucket working in whaling and 160 Wampanoags that were working in the whaling industry on Nantucket. And so it became, you know, it started becoming a very big business in there. They actually, also in Long Island, there was whaling. And by about 1818, well, actually, I should say, the first sperm whale killed off of Nantucket was in 1712. And so that started the offshore whaling, because before that, whaling was done from shore. And I'll show you a picture how close whales can come into shore. And so when they had, after the whaling on shore, then they started doing offshore whaling for sperm whales. And so they started catching them, and then they started kind of decimating the populations close by, and so they had to move further out. And so they went around Cape Horn out of South America and went over into Pacific. And it was in 1818 that they actually discovered the rich offshore grounds, which were about 1,000 miles off of South America, which drew the Essex into that area, because it was in 1820 that the Essex was stove by a whale. It's called, when a whale would the stove. And the idea when you were out whaling, it was the motto was a dead whale or a stove boat. You know, and it was interesting because as whaling started, you know, they first started with the harpoons and things, throwing them by hand. But there were guns early on that would shoot harpoons and things like that. But there were some captains in the Nantucket fleet that said, we're not going to use guns because we don't really like killing the whales just like it's killing other animals and things like that. So we're going to go out with the harpoons because it's either the whale or us, to give them a kind of like a fighting chance. And I'll show you some video, actually, of whale knocking over a boat. I got some real video from 1916 showing an actual whale trip. And so when I look at this, this is the New Bedford, and this is the whale oil. That's in all those barrels of oil. And it became a very big source for lighting around the world. And New Bedford became it was actually per capita the richest city in the country because of whale oil at one time. And it wasn't until the discovery of when Edwin Drake in 1859 actually discovered oil in Pennsylvania, and we had oil coming in a large amount, that now kerosene, which was also used as the lighting source, became easier to get than whale oil. Also, kerosene didn't spoil like whale oil would. So that was one of the downfalls of whaling. We also had whaling has been rich in our history. In the Revolutionary War, because of the power of whaling and the economic benefit of whaling, the British attacked the whaling fleet and decimated a lot of the whaling vessels. So that, it knocked down the fleet quite a bit due to that. In the War of 1812, again, they were decimating the fleet. But then Nantucket actually came back, because at one time there were as many as like 2,700 whaling vessels and all. So they had, throughout the world, they had a lot of, because England actually, John Quincy Adams, actually, when he was ambassador to Britain, the British, because they wanted to bolster their own whaling industry, applied a tariff to or duty to the American whale oil coming in, to try and keep American whale oil. So he was arguing in Britain to get rid of that duty, but unfortunately he didn't win, and that duty went on. But we also had, in the Civil War, one of the things that, because the North, in order to get back at the North and knock down its power, they attacked the whaling fleet, because that was a major thing. So that was one of the big in addition to the whale population going down, one of the big things that helped with the decline of whaling was the knockdown of the whaling fleet during the Civil War. And so the golden age of whaling actually started in 1818 and basically was at its peak in 1853, and then it declined to when the last whaling vessel left out of this area was the Wanderer, that left in 1924, and it got knocked in a hurricane, and it was beached on Cuttyhunk Island, which is at the end of the Elizabeth Island chain off of there. So whaling has been in a rich history, and we, believe it or not, we still use whale oil today in this country. Anybody know where? All our spacecraft that need lubrication use whale oil, because it's the only thing that meets the criteria up in space. No other lubricant works as well as whale oil. So the Hubble telescope is oiled with whale oil and stuff. So it's still part of our nature. Now, when we look at the biology of some of the whales, this is a humpback whale skeleton. And there's some beautiful skeletons in the New Bedford Whaling Museum that are hanging up. I had some pictures, but there was too many things to try and stick in here. But anyway, the whale, you can see these, where's my little thing? See these little bones right here? Those are the remnants of hind limbs, because the whales at one time migrated from land into the sea. Well, not migrated, but eventually evolved into the sea. And we can see that this is the flipper of the humpback whale, and you can see the long digits right here that make up, that's homologous to our hands and things that we have, and the bones of the arm. and the clavicle here, the shoulder bone, and the jaw bones. Now, there are two main types of whales that we have. There's the baleen whales, which are the top whales. They don't have teeth, but they have baleen in their mouths. It's material that hangs down almost like a comb. I'll show you some pictures afterwards. And this is actually a piece of baleen that's from a whale, and you can see how it's flexible it is. Now, we had no plastics at those times, so this became very, very valuable as part of the whaling. And the right whale, which we'll talk about, had a lot of baleen in it. And there was a time where sometimes this baleen became so valuable that they would just take the baleen and then discard the rest of the whale, because they could make enough money just from the baleen. Because this would be anything we used plastic for, they would use this. And this is made out of the same material our fingernails are made out of. So this would hang in the mouth, and I'll show you some pictures later on. You can see actually a whale feeding. And so we have the baleen whales, and we have the toothed whales. So these are the baleen and the odontocetes whales. And so in the toothed whales, they catch their prey by chasing after it and snapping at what they want. The baleen whales just feed by opening their mouth and going forward with their mouths wide open and taking everything in. And then taking their tongues and pushing the water back out through the baleen, and then the baleen would capture any of the, so it would be like this hanging in their mouth, and the baleen would capture any food that was on it, and they just lick it off and swallow it. And so, but you know, that could be a ton of food at a time, doing it that way. And also, there's some differences with the blowhole. The blowhole is how they breathe, and you can see it's on the top here. With a toothed whale, here there's a single blowhole. Right there, it's just and it opens and closes. So when they're under the water, it closes so that water doesn't go down there. In a baleen whale, this is a picture of a humpback whale, and most of these pictures I've taken. And this is the area behind, in front of the blowhole. It's kind of like when they're going on there, when they're near the surface, the water kind of goes away from it. So you'll see, looking from behind, here's the two blowholes. So in a baleen whale, there are two blowholes. So this kind of looks like you're swimming on your back with your nose sticking up. But that's the baleen. And there we can see the spout coming out of the humpback whale. And you see that kind of two little things starting out. When it eventually comes up, it looks like one big kind of puff on the humpback whale, but it is coming out of two holes, and that's the exhaled breath. The breath is warm and moist inside, so when they exhale the warm, moist air into the cooler air around it, the water condenses in it and causes the spout to occur. And so, as I was saying before, the whales can be pretty close to shore. This is a humpback whale right here, and there's the shore off of Provincetown with seagulls on the beach. But actually, where that whale is, even though it's that close, it's in about 120 feet of water because it drops off very closely. But the whales were in close to shore at a time, and there were a lot of whales. And in some places, even now, they come into the bays and things like that periodically. And so this is the area around right here, which is Cape Cod, and we have off to the, it's not working too well, but off to the right, you see George's Bank, which is the very famous fishing grounds that we hear a lot about. Just north of, right there, is Stellwagen Bank, which is just north of Cape Cod. And this is an area where we can go now and see whales. They come into this, well, most of the whales right now have moved off because the whales migrate. The whales come here to feed up to these bank areas, because a bank is an area, a very shallow area. There was a time where on George's Bank, which I've been out there, and it's about 200 and some miles out to sea. The furthest part is about 250 miles out. But there was a time, it's shallow, that the winds were right and everything. They were able to play a baseball game out there on part of the bank. So it's a very rich, and the reason it's so rich is because it comes from the deep area to the shallow area. So you have what's known as upwelling occurs. The deep water is rich in nutrients. So it comes up with the currents, up along the bank, bringing those nutrients to the surface. Now, just like we put nutrients, and when I'm talking about nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus. And when this is brought up, what do we use nitrogen and phosphorus for? For our gardens, right? You put nitrogen for fertilizers, for plants to grow. Well, and this is there's another area. This is Stellwagen Bank right up here, just north of the Cape. So we have, this is phytoplankton, and phytoplankton blooms occur. And when phytoplankton blooms occur, you get a lot of, this is the algae that's floating in the ocean. You also get a lot of zooplankton, which feed on the phytoplankton. And thus, you have a rich area of soup. That's why, you know, up here, we have a lot of, you know, you go in the water and it's not cloudy. Or the water's more cloudy. You don't have the visibility. If anybody's been down in the Caribbean or so, the water's very clear. That's because you don't have all the nutrients and everything, and you don't have all the algae. That's why the whales come up here, because there's a lot of food in the water. And so they come up here and eat like crazy while they're up here, because they're going to go down south, and the whales are going to move down south to the Caribbean in the wintertime, and that's where they have their calves. Now, if we think when they're down there, they may not feed for 6 months during that time because the food isn't there for them to feed on. So they have, but that's where they're having their calves. Now their calves, have you ever been in the water? How long can you stay in the water up here? When you go, even in the summertime, you go in the water. You get cold pretty quickly. Well, just think, these animals are spending their whole lives in the water. So, and they're mammals, just like we are. They're warm-blooded. So in order to keep themselves warm, they have a thick blanket of blubber on them, which is what the whalers were going after, the blubber. And so because of this blubber that's on them, it kept them warm. Now, when the calves are born, they don't have a lot of blubber. So they evolved, if they had their calves up here, the calves would be too cold and they'd die. So they've evolved to migrate down to the Caribbean where they have their calves. Now the calves have a time to develop their blubber because they're feeding on the milk from the mother, because being a mammal, mammary glands, they feed milk. The milk is so rich in fat that these whales are gaining, a blue whale will gain 500 to 700 pounds a day feeding on the mother's milk. So they got to build up that blubber so that they can come up and then be in the warmer area. So we look at one of the whales. This is the right whale. And it was called the right whale because it was the right whale to kill. This was one of the easiest whales for the whalers to kill because they were pretty slow moving. You know, they weren't, and remember, you're rowing in a boat. So in order to catch up with something, you know, you have to be, you know, they could row pretty well in those things, but some of the other whales are doing 30, 40 miles an hour, you know, so that they're not going to catch up to them. But these whales, they could catch up to. And another good thing about this whale was when you killed it, it floated. So it was easy to drag it back. And the right whale is a baleen whale. And here's another picture of the right whale. You can see those little things in the front. Those are called callosities. And they can actually, by photographing those, can identify different whales based on the pattern of the callosities on there. Now, an interesting thing about these whales is they have no dorsal fin on the back. And so here we have the right whale. The thing about the right whales is they have, when their spout, so they could tell the right whale, the spout comes out like two spouts, and I'll show you. And this is the way they feed right here. They feed, interesting, like I said, that they take in the whale. The right whale feeds a little bit different in that it just opens its mouth and just kind of keeps swimming. And so the water comes in here and goes through the baleen, but as they're going, they're skimming the food out of the water. And here's there's a right whale. You can see that double spout, and you can see that injury that was on there. That's one of the big things about, I don't know if you want to see that again quickly. It's a quick one. See the two spouts that came up, and there's that injury on its back. I'm pointing there, and it's up there. But the right whales are one of the most endangered of species. There's only, the recent estimate is only about 490 of the North Atlantic right whale left now. And so there's actually, for captains, there's called a whale alert. And you can go online and you can see this, and they can go on their phones, and it gives them an alert when they pull into this app where a whale is located. Because it's interesting, because the right whale makes a certain sound, and in the channel that comes into Boston Harbor, the shipping channel, there's these buoys that are in there, and it actually records the sounds that the whales would make. And this sound is sent down to Cornell University. When it picks up a sound, they analyze it to see whether it's a right whale. Then they send back into the app, and it tells you where the right whale is located in the channel. And so it warns captains that they have to slow their vessels down to 10 miles an hour, 10 knots, when they're in that area. And then it gives them an estimate of when the whales will go. And also, it's pretty high-tech stuff. And here's, again, a right whale feeding. It's funny, I never saw a right whale while I was out on the whaling trips that I was, or the trips that I went on. But I was riding my bike in the Cape Cod Canal one time with my family. And we were riding along, and we're getting ready to leave. And I said, should we bring our camera? And I said, nah, we don't need the camera. So I went riding, and a right whale came through the Cape Cod Canal. So they had to shut the shipping down on the canal for this. So I'm 20 feet away from this right whale and no camera. You know, and so this is how the baleen plates are arranged. You can see how closely they are arranged so that and down the bottom, you can see how it goes, you know, kind of feathery at the bottom. So it creates a very good filter. They can filter out some very small, they're filtering out like zooplankton, they're filtering out euphausids or little shrimp-like animals. That's what the blue whale, which is the largest animal that's ever lived on Earth, is feeding on something about this big. You know, but they occur in huge schools, and they feed on, there's thousands, you know, so they'll eat a ton at a time, one gulp. So then we have the sperm whale. This was the whale that, you know, we rammed into the Essex. And here's a picture of a sperm whale. Again, they have that large head that's on there, and this is their mouth is down here, and this is a toothed whale. So they have teeth in their lower jaw, about this size for an adult, and they'll capture things. They do have the ability to hold their breath for a long period of time and dive very deeply. They know how deep they can dive. They know they can dive at least 3,500 feet on a breath and then come back up, because one was trapped in the transatlantic cable when it went down there. And so they can go down. But they don't have the problem that divers would have if they were going down that deep. They can shoot right back up. And the reason is the air in their lungs is under pressure from the surface. Whereas if we're diving and we go down, we're diving under higher pressure. And as we get under higher pressure, the regulator increases the pressure so that our lungs can still expand as the outside pressure of the water is crushing us. So it's under high pressure, so nitrogen gas is in our bloodstream from us breathing it. Now, if we shoot up too fast, what happens is the pressure on the outside releases, and so now the bubbles, our blood actually boils from the nitrogen gas coming out of it, and it causes the bends. That's what the bends are, the nitrogen gas bubbles that get caught in the joints, and it's very painful. And you can die if they don't. You have to get into a decompression chamber, actually, where they compress you again back to where you were so that the bubbles come out of the blood again. Then they slowly, to do a decompression dive, you have to go step by step coming up. You have to slowly come up. And so this is some of the locations we can see of the sperm whales. And sperm whales are also pretty much around the world. All those dark spots are where the sperm whales were, so you can see they're pretty well spread out. One thing about the sperm whale is that if we look at the previous, their spout, they could tell the spout goes kind of outward at an angle, so it's swimming like this. The spout goes out like that, so they could tell a sperm whale just by seeing its spout. And here's an interesting video of a sperm whale. That is a little bit of a commercial.
The New England Acura dealers are proud sponsors of Boston Children's Hospital. Upgrade to a new Acura during our Luxury for All sales event and join us in raising over $500,000 for the hospital. Acura, great cars, great cause.
Guess one of the drawbacks of being able to get this is you have to listen to the commercials. But this is an amazing video. Look at the guy in the water right there, filming. So when you think about, the idea of these things as monsters and stuff, this thing could destroy those guys that are in there without a second thought. And you see the mouth there on the underside. It's very narrow lower jaw. See how narrow it is? And you can see there's the teeth in the lower part. And there's its eye right there. Oh, keep pointing. The eye's right over here. Whoop, gotta stop that. We'll keep getting music here. And this is the head of the sperm whale. And inside you can see these large organs that are here, which are on the head. You can see the upper part is called the spermaceti organ, and the lower part is called the junk. So this is this melon area that's divided into two areas. They still don't know exactly what the role of the spermaceti organ is. They think it's probably something with being able to, with sound, and sound production, because in dolphins they have a smaller melon, and it actually focuses the sound, because you know how you hear the dolphins make click, 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 click type sound? That's their sonar. They send out a signal, it leaves this area right here, bounces off, and comes back. It's the sound, the vibration is collected by the lower jaw, and it moves by the lower jaw to the ear area over here, and it sends its signal to the brain. So the sound is made in this chamber right over here, and it's sent out, and then it comes back. The reason it's called a reason it's called the spermaceti organ was this oil was a very good oil that they used for burning, and also it gave a very nice flame. But when it hit with air, it turned into a kind of milky substance which resembled semen. And so that's why it got called the spermaceti organ. And I'll show you, I got some video later that actually shows them taking the stuff out and using it. And so this is some of the wax in the candle from the spermaceti. If you cool the oil, you get a waxy substance inside. And that comes out, that's the wax, and that's the oil in that little jar. And another thing that they have is ambergris, which is actually a deposit in their intestines. And when it first comes out, it smells pretty bad and everything, but after a while, it actually gets a sweet kind of smell after it sits there for a while. And this is the basis for making the lasting material they used in perfumes. So sometimes a block of ambergris could be worth $30,000. So just one block of this stuff. So it was a very valuable kind of, it's kind of like a waste thing in their intestine, but we figure out a way to use it. And here you can see the lower jaw of a whale. On the whaleboat, they had a kind of a thing that they would lower on the starboard side of the ship. And that's where they would bring the whales in to cut them up, to bring them in. And so you can see the lower jaw, you can see all the teeth on the lower jaw right there. Does anybody know why it's called port and starboard? It was called starboard. It's a Norse term meaning steerboard. So the steerboard, they used to have, if you look at some of the Viking ships and stuff, they steer, and even on the sailing vessels, they had or the boats, they'd have a steering thing on one side of the vessel. So you wouldn't want to put that side towards the dock. You would put the other side towards the dock. So that was the port side, and steerboard became starboard, and so you have starboard and port. And so here we can see on the starboard side, they would have this little platform that they would lower down so they could work on the whale, because the whale would be too big to bring the whole thing onto the boat, so they would have to cut it up. And here's the
advertised in Boston, New York, and Buffalo.
This is an actual whaling voyage from 1916.
Blow your winds in the morning and blow your winds high-ho. All the way you're running gear and blow, boys, blow. They'll send you to New Bedford, a famous whaling port, and give you...
That's the try-works there that they had, where they would boil down the blubber. See, Department of Education. Look, see what they were doing?
Good evening. Welcome to Dateline Boston. My name is Jim Britt, and this is another in our series titled Whaling Days, the great whaling days out of New Bedford at the beginning of the century. Tonight, we're going to go aboard ship again, and here is James S. Healy, librarian of the Free Public Library in New Bedford. Jim?
Good evening again. Tonight we're going to give you the second part of the film we started last week, the film which again is being shown for the very first time on television. And again, without further ado, here's Mr. Hegarty, our Master of Ceremony.
This film is a continuation of the Viola film. And while ships the size of Viola would rather take small whales, they never passed up a big one.
See, if you look at the spout on there, you can see when they show it, you can see the spout going forward.
The last ones that have been shown. And they had larger spout. And the men at masthead would stretch the hour blows out to 4 or 5 seconds. And the captain knew that they had a large whale in sight. And he goes through the same process. He orders the boats to get ready. And he goes to masthead so that he can signal out.
So that was the area where the crow's nest, where the guys would yell, "There she blows," when they saw a whale from up in the... Well, I used to be on the boat like that, up on the tallest part of the boat, so I could look around and find, because we found them the same way, with binoculars, looking out, looking for the spouts.
They would lower the boat, and the boats would go onto the whale, same as they did small ones. These are larger whales, they're a little more difficult for them to take. As they sailed up to the whale, the boat steerer, harpooner, would dart the harpoons into the whale, both of them. Then they would take the sail, mast and sail down, put them under the afterthought.
Because they actually had sails on those boats, like they talked about in the book.
This is all being done when the boat's traveling along about 30 or 35 miles an hour. Once they get the end shifted, they start hauling up onto the whale. He runs into the wind always. And they haul up onto the whale so that the mate can lance it. And he keeps doing this. He hauls up, lances the whale, and meanwhile they have this Nantucket sleigh ride. And it's only a modern New Bedford whale boat that could stand the punishment. That whale will be going along when he's really...
Now they would wrap the rope around there, and it would go so fast and it pulling out that they'd have to pour water on it to keep it from catching fire.
It will catch on fire. They dump water into the tubs and onto the loggerhead. And meanwhile, that boat is bouncing along from wave to wave, and that shows how the line was coiled in so that it will come out of the tubs without kinking. That's the man putting the water on the loggerhead.
You can see it moving.
They can't, haven't been able to haul up onto him, and this is what's called a Nantucket sleigh ride. There's the whale starting off. These boats are nothing but half-inch cedar plank, but they're the only ones that can stand this punishment.
So you can see they could stand a lot, so when you think about them out to sea that they were on those vessels, they were pretty seaworthy.
But it's like having a bear by the tail. You either go, let go and get out of the way or kill it. These whales are down, these pictures are taken of whales down on the western grounds. That's about halfway between the United States and the Azore Islands. That line will run out the whole...
So they'd have sometimes as much as a mile of line out.
Sometimes they'll have to hitch on another boat's line. They've seen whales that have taken as much as a mile of line out. They don't take it straight down, but down and underwater and drag it. Though a sperm whale can go down about a mile. These men have got to continue to haul up on the whale, and when they get near him, they will take him, the mate will lance him. And the mate isn't considered a good man unless when he comes back aboard ship, that boat has black skin on it. And that's the way the whale will continue to run. It may be, as I say, 20 minutes or 20 hours. These are the best pictures of... They take and put a buoy, or we call it a drug, on the whale, and if they're quite a ways away from the ship, they might put a weight in it, which is nothing but a flag on a pole. And that's so that they can see the whale, because they float just awash. But after you kill the whale, you're not through. You've got to start and tow this monster back to the
So they
ship.
had to row it back,
This whale here
maybe a few miles back to the boat.
Weighs 100 or 110 tons. And when they're pulling on the oars there, it's just as though you're pulling a boat that's anchored. And it takes hours to haul that whale back. And when they get within a quarter of a mile of the ship, the boat pays out the line, and they throw the end aboard ship, and the whole crew takes the whole, pulling the whale towards the ship, using the motion of the ship to assist them. Those oars that you see, the ones on the right-hand side, looking at that boat, they're 16 foot long, and the other two, one of them's 14 and the 18. And this gives you an idea of the size of the whale and how much...
Look at how the oars are bending.
Those oars bend like willows when they pull on. And that whale is about 3 times the length of the boat. Those boats are only 30 foot long, and they made it hot.
And so that's actually a two-part series that you can go and find there. Now, when we were doing they were hunting the slower whales and going around and hunting them. Well, eventually the numbers were going down and things were getting, it was harder to catch the whales until this was a Norwegian, he was a whaler, and he came up with the exploding cannon. So it was a cannon that would fire the harpoon or the line with an exploding head at the front, which is what they still use today. and they shoot it. It has a hand grenade in the head, and so when it gets shot in the whale, it explodes and kills the whale. Doesn't kill it right away, but it does get in there, and it does damage to it so that they can easily pull it in. Because the way they used to go on there was that they had after the harpoon, and it was interesting, the harpoon that they used had just a barb on it. Then in 1848, an African-American blacksmith, Lewis Temple, developed the toggle harpoon. So it went in like this, and then there was a little toggle on there so that the head would turn like this. And so now it was stuck inside. So you had the harpoon and the thing was stuck inside like this. So now it was, it wouldn't pull out like some of the others would. And so, but this guy came with the cannon. And when the cannon came out now, and it was on steam ships, it was allowed now to catch the faster whales. And some of the other baleen whales could now be hunted. And it was actually in the early 1900s to about the 1960s, we killed more whales in that period, actually, than in the whole glory days of whaling, because of the ability to now hunt these whales in every ocean and under any conditions, going into the Arctic. And so one of the whales that was now able to be hunted really was the humpback whale. This is the whale that people like to see when they go on a whale watch. And it's named Megaptera nova anglii, which means large-winged New Englander. So this whale has some of those flippers on the front, can be 10 feet or more in length. And so here's the spout of a humpback whale. See, it's kind of lower and it's puffier than the others. And so why it was called a humpback whale, one of the things is when it goes to dive, it makes a very strong arch on its back, and it lifts up its tail, or flukes. And the flukes are seen. Now, the interesting thing about the flukes of a humpback whale is they're like fingerprints. So you can photograph these, and you don't have to tag them. You can see where they go. So when they appear somewhere else and someone else photographs them, you can match it. And I'll show you a few of the different ones. This whale is all black on the underside, only with a little bit of white on the left side. So this whale was called, its name was Sinestra. And the reason why, anybody know why it's Sinestra? Latin for left was sinister. So that's where Sinestra came from, its name. So all these whales have names, and they're all cataloged. The year I was doing it, I think I identified about 25 to 30 different whales by photographs. And so you can see the different patterns on the underside of the tail. Also, you can photograph the dorsal fin. Will have differences. So you can see that's a little one. There's more of a hook. There's a big hook on that one. And then the humpback whales will approach boats. Whale watchers, you'll be sitting there, and the whale will actually come over. And so at that point, you're wondering, who's really looking at who? Because you can see that their eye is right over near the flipper there, and they're looking right up at the people in the boat. This is one of the behaviors they also do. This is called spy hopping. And you can see the eye is right here. And they do that, and they look around. And so I remember this picture when I took it, because there was a kid right in the front of the boat, and the whale came up. And I remember the kid yelling, "The eye's looking at me! The eye's looking at me!" And so, so that's the humpback. They will do a behavior called flipper slapping, where they actually lay on their side, raise their flippers, and slap them in the water. There's one laying on its side. You can see that's its fluke back here, and there's the flipper. And these, like the right whales, and they may be about 35, 40 feet. The sperm whales may be about 35 for the females. The males can get about 50, but some of them you get these rogue whales or these that can get up to 80, 90 feet, which was probably like one of the whales that actually struck the boat. This is doing a tail lobbing. Humpback whales are about 40, 48, 45 feet in length average. So this is called tail lobbing, where they actually slap their tails on the ground, on the water. And again, this is type of communication. And then whales breach. You see the pictures, Pacific Life Insurance or something like that, where they show the whale jumping out of the water. Well, these are some actual pictures. There's a whale diving, looking on its back, coming. And sometimes they'll turn around, swing around when they're breaching. That's called breaching. And then they'll also have, with their mouths, they'll do a lobbing with their mouths. So they'll lift up and they'll actually slap the front of their mouths down on the water. You can see the water coming off as it's heading down. And so here we can see the baleen on there, and here's the baleen plates that are hanging from the mouth. And so here's a picture looking into the mouth of a humpback whale, and you can see all the baleen plates hanging, and you can see how kind of feathery it is at the end of it. So what a good filter that it makes. And they'll do a thing called bubble net feeding, where they actually will exhale bubbles underneath and create a net-like action, which brings all their prey inside from the bubbles. And then here you can see the bubbles coming up, and then they'll come right up in the center of that to capture their prey. And you see the mouth is open. And those pleats, here's one, you can see it's rolling over near the boat. You can see these pleats on the underside of the whale. Those allow that area underneath to expand. And when it expands, then all the water comes in, and then they push it back out with their tongues. And here's one, again, you can see the pleats there. And here's one feeding. Sometimes birds will actually dive into their mouths while they're open like that, because they see all the fish and everything that's in there, because these are actually catching sand lance, which is a fish about that long and about the thickness of your finger. And they'll all be in there, so they'll go right in there. You can see the baleen right here. And sometimes they'll actually work in pairs. And so here's two of them together feeding. There's another one feeding. And here's a mother and a calf. So the calf will stay with the mother for almost 2 years or so when they're with it. And there's another mother and calf. And here's one doing a thing called logging, where they kind of just hang on the surface. And now this is a time where it's dangerous, when they can get hit by boats, because sometimes when they're like that, you can't really see them, and you're going along in a boat and you run over them and they get the propeller marks on their back and things like that. So it can be a problem for the whales. Now this was taken on our whale watch that we went on with the school last year, and hopefully I'll have some money this year. We can go again. So that whale was just tail lobbing there. There's the spout.
And another whale bubble feeding at 9 o'clock.
Oh, right there.
So there's the bubble. Right here you can see the bubbles coming up.
Two different whales in the area. If you just Great, looks like there's chunky dorsal fins. Another one else at 11.
I wonder if I can speed this up here. There we go. So here's the whale. So it's actually laying on its back, flapping its tail. Now it turned over, and it's flapping its tail the other way.
Here's a smile. He's right there. You can see him. There he is. Let's go to the other side.
And so that's the whale flipper slapping. Okay, now another whale that we were able to see was the finback whale. These whales can get up to about 60 feet. And they're interesting because they have a dark patch on one side and a lighter coloration on the right side of their mouth. And it's thought that for countercurrent shading, because they'll feed on their side like this, so it has the dark on the top and the light on the bottom, so it creates a shading. Here you can see the spout of the finback whale is very tall and narrow. You can see that white area on the right side. There's another view of the finback. And here's the left side. You can see the dark coloration on the mouth. And you can also look at these, help to identify them by photographing these chevrons on the back. And here, when they dive, they don't lift their flukes up. That's the best they'll do. And so here's there's what basically you see with a finback whale. So they are very fast whales. Then the minke whale. This whale is the one that's the most hunted today. There's also the most numbers of it. And this is about what you see with a minke whale. You know, you just see the back there, the smallest of the whales. They're only about 30 feet or so. That's a dead minke whale that was floating in the water, probably got hit by a boat or something. And here's what you see with the minke whales. So they're much smaller. And then this, we don't have time, but unless I know people want to stay, but I know we've got to go pretty soon. And this is showing modern whaling. So it's kind of a gory type video. If anybody's interested in seeing it. It's about 5 minutes. Oh, all right.
Throughout the 20th century, 2 million great whales were slaughtered, with some species hunted to the brink of extinction. Worldwide concern led to a ban on commercial whaling in 1986. Yet loopholes allow the killing to continue. Norway, Japan, and Iceland will kill over 1,400 whales this year in commercial and alleged scientific whaling operations. But this issue is not just concerned with quotas or population statistics. It is not just about the conservation of these magnificent creatures of which we know so little. It is about cruelty. As far back as 1946, Harry Lilly, a doctor aboard an Antarctic whaling ship, likened whaling to a horse having 2 or 3 explosive spears stuck into its stomach and being made to pull a butcher's truck through the streets of London while it pours blood into the gutter. That same year, the signing of an international convention saw the birth of the International Whaling Commission, or IWC, to regulate the industry and the flow of whale oil, its primary product. With alternatives to whale products freely available, the world has moved on. But under the terms of the convention, the IWC has not. As Dr. Lilly observed over 50 years ago, the gunners themselves admit that if the whales could scream, the industry would stop, for nobody would be able to stand it. And the cruelty issues involved in whaling remain unresolved to this day. For the very way in which whales are killed has altered little since the invention of the grenade-tipped harpoon in the 19th century. The harpoon is designed to penetrate the whale's body before detonating, inflicting massive shock and internal injuries. It's not easy to hit a distant, largely submerged, moving target from a moving platform on a moving sea, let alone kill it instantly. And injured whales are often finished off with another harpoon or shot with rifles. With the meat from whaling operations ultimately intended for human consumption, the killing methods fall short of the standards necessary to achieve humane slaughter in livestock animals. In fact, a recent scientific review concluded that the criteria used by the IWC to assess death, loss of consciousness, and ability to feel pain are inadequate. Whales may survive and experience pain over a significantly longer period than we yet know. Adapted for diving and holding their breaths for long periods, their physiology makes it difficult to accurately determine death. Are some whales still alive when hauled up onto the flensing deck for butchering? It's not only the great whales that suffer. Smaller whales and dolphins are slaughtered annually in unregulated hunts that remain unacknowledged by the IWC. With some countries lobbying for a return to full-scale commercial whaling, a global coalition of animal welfare societies is calling for urgent action to protect the welfare of whales. The whaling debate is not just about numbers and conservation, it is also about suffering. It is time to watch whale welfare.
So that's a modern whaling. You know, the pilot whale, this is a whale that's also called a pothead whale because its head kind of looks like a pot. This particular whale is hunted quite a bit in southern Iceland. And every year they actually will corral all the whales into an area and drive them onto the beach. And then they say that, you know, and it's funny, it's like the whole island comes out, all the kids and everything, and it's a big traditional thing. So it's like a tradition that they've had for centuries, that they come out, I don't know about centuries, but come out for a while, that they come out, and then they say, you know, they make one cut in the head of it, and it's supposed to kill it right away and stuff. But then they divide all the meat that they have to everybody in the community, get some of the meat. So it's not like they're selling it, it's all that particular day. They'll maybe do 100 pilot whales for that particular hunt, and then it goes to the pilot whales. Right now in their numbers, there's 750,000 or so of them. So their claim is that they're not an endangered species or so. So here's some pilot whales I took on George's Bank, and there's a tail of a pilot whale. Then the common dolphin. These are around, this is some pictures that I took off of Santa Barbara this summer. And here, this is a nice little video that I had showing them. Come on. Media unavailable. I don't know why it's not showing it. It's in there. Oh well. But it's a nice thing of the showing all the how many of them, because they're in pods of hundreds of these common dolphins and they come right to the boat. You know, we're showing coming, you know, right in on the boat. And this is a blue whale, and they have a long spout, and I don't know if they'll see if this shows this one. It's going to say media unavailable too. This was a blue whale that I took. I don't know why it's saying it's not available. I was just showing it before. But anyway. Oh, I know why. Oh, there it goes. Oh, so maybe the other one come on, and then.
Well, it's moving a little bit slower than I thought, but still heading to the east. Make sure you hold on.
This is off of near the Channel Islands, off of California, and the Channel Islands are called the Galapagos of the Americas, of the United States, because they have the same kind of structure of the islands. There's the spout, a very tall spout.
He's not going to let me do that. We'll just hold our ground here.
And this whale was about 80 feet long.
Left-hand side. That is the largest creature that has ever lived on the planet. Larger than any dinosaurs. You can see it's more gray in color. There it goes. It's going to go on its deeper dive. We'll wait it out.
Not stopping for some reason. But anyway, when they go and dive, no, starting from the beginning. Anyway, when they go and dive, they end up, they don't, sometimes they'll raise their flukes, but most of the time they don't. I just want to see if I can get that, just that last video. Maybe it'll come eventually. And then I'll stop. There we go. There you can see the common dolphin right alongside the boat. And there's a little baby one right there. Right there. So they ride the bow wave of the ship because that's pressure wave that comes out, and they kind of like surf. So there you can see the pod that's out there. And this area is a marine sanctuary, just like Stellwagen Bank is a marine sanctuary now. It's called the Jerry Studs Marine Sanctuary. And on a sanctuary, you can't do any like commercial ventures and or mining or anything like that. They still do fishing and stuff like that on there, but they can't hunt the whales and. Okay, I'll end there. You know, there's I hope you enjoyed learning about the whales that we have, and that these are all the whales. The blue whales can even be seen around here, but just further north. And I don't know if there's any time, if anybody has any questions or anything that they might want to ask. Yep.
I had a question. From boats, it doesn't scare the whales?
Well, there's a requirement, and there's certain distances that you have to maintain away from the whales. There's regulations now, because there was a time when the whale watching first started that people were going right up to the whales and everything, but you have to stay away. But the whales actually, some of them do actually come right to the boat, as you saw that one there, the humpback. So there are regulations as to how far you have to stay away from the whale.
Robert, I want to thank you so much. Let's get a hand.
Oh.